BPM is one of the most interesting games I played last year, and at least my third or second favourite roguelike I've ever played, depending on the day you ask me. The game is a rhythm FPS, which on its own is a really fun concept and should be enough to say on the game, but if not, I'll continue. Everything you do in BPM must line up with the beat of the music. Some actions can also be done on the offbeat, but if you're not on beat then the game will void your input. The game does go much further than just that gimmick though. One of my favourite little aspects that most people will probably look over is the shop loyalty system. As you purchase more and more things, either at the general shop or the armory, more things will unlock for future runs. And this helps players not be massively overwhelmed as soon as they start out playing the game, and also rewards players for experimenting by purchasing items from the shops. This stops players from committing to their base options out of familiarity, or ignoring these new options because of overwhelming complexity, which is an issue that can crop up a lot in roguelikes. There's also a bank you can find early on depending on your RNG where you can store money, and that money can be withdrawn from any bank you find, even if it's in another run. So if you're getting towards the end of a run and there's a bank nearby, you can store a bunch of coins there to withdraw next run to make it slightly easier for future you. There's also keys which are used to open lock chests, usually containing items which have a variety of effects. Some items give you a massive speed boost, some items basically aim for you, and you have 4 slots for these items. A helmet, a shield, gloves, and boots. And you'll come across a variety of items of these types, like a shield that gives you infinite ammo or one that doubles all the damage you deal. And it kind of works like creating a build on an RPG, but just on a much more micro scale. Depending on the items you get and choose to keep, you could be a speed machine or a damage dealing monster that could just tear through enemies. Or just have infinite jumps that avoid any kind of damage from the majority of early to mid game enemies. Combine this with the brilliant implementation of the rhythm mechanics in boss fights, you'll catch yourself counting the beat aloud or tapping your foot to keep track. As you gain a higher and higher understanding of the game's mechanics and enemies, you can fall into a rhythm yourself. I hear it described as a flow state sometimes by the few people I know who also play this game. And it's really satisfying to blast through enemies as you dodge these predictable but fun attacks, almost like a bullet hell. Speaking of those enemies, the variety is great. The early enemies are incredibly predictable, all of these spider enemies that just jump or charge in a straight line towards you. And the bats and flying enemies just fly around in a predictable pattern trying to shoot slow moving projectiles at you. But towards the end of a run you'll be fighting early bosses alongside all the newly introduced harder enemies with all of their complicated mechanics. Enemies that once guarded the gate towards the next level are now treated the same way as those spiders and bats from the beginning. The progression feels fantastic. It can get to a point where as soon as you enter a room you understand the capabilities of everything you're fighting because you've fought these enemies so many times before, and therefore you can prioritize targets appropriately. On harder difficulties it is even more important as more enemies will spawn and the bosses have gimmicks. Some bosses are cloned, which means there are 2 of them that share a health bar. But because of how much some bosses move, you either need to have brilliant spatial awareness or some brilliant movement skills and items to survive. Another type is Vengeful, which is just a few more projectiles being sent your way. And while not being as unique as the cloned variant, still makes the fights harder because now there is never a safe spot, which removes the most reliable ways to beat some bosses. And all of this combines to make you just have to think a lot harder. But if you focus on these new additions, you might lose focus on the rhythm, and if you lose focus on the rhythm, you're just dead. And there's tons more effects I haven't mentioned or just didn't get any footage of. The variety, even in just a small aspect of the game, is super impressive. The game also has a large variety of weapons you can find in a run, all appealing to a variety of ways to play the game. Because reloads have to be done in time with the music, some guns take multiple beats to reload, like the rifle or the revolver, but what guns will work best for you in a run is dictated both by how you play and what items you have. I usually gravitate towards items that give straight up stat boosts, double damage, speed multipliers, that kind of thing. I don't really dive into more complicated mechanics in a run like creep or mind flay. And anything that fundamentally changes the playstyle doesn't really appeal to me, like the infinite jumps or the exploding jumps. So I usually stick to the simpler weapons that don't have complicated reloads or have to be cocked between each shot. As you're probably realising, all of the mechanics work with each other to make each run about adaptation. How well can you deal with the hand you've got? It doesn't matter where you're going in, and while you could, in theory, reset your run every time you don't get exactly what you want, the game is about how you adapt. Sometimes you get a shop on the first floor, but not enough money to buy everything you want, but depending on the same RNG, you won't even have a shop on the first floor to begin with. The weapons on sale in the armory could appeal to your playstyle or they could not. The crypts are a more challenging but overall more rewarding alternative you can take to the second level of the game. But in most runs there won't even be an entrance, or you won't have enough keys spare to open it along with a library to get spells. Speaking of spells, they work in two types. Some spells are smaller abilities like throwing a coin for a large bit of damage or a spell that deals damage over time. Some spells are bigger abilities like summoning a chest, doing massive damage to everything in the room, or regenerating half of your max HP. But most of these are locked behind a library which takes a key to open. So, unless it's a skeleton key, which is a really rare item, you'll have to count your keys carefully and make sure to explore an entire floor before you risk wasting them. Now, given that BPM is a rhythm game, the music should be good, right? Well, yeah, in my opinion at least. A lot of the music leans more on the rock side, which is definitely aided by the game's visual design. Every floor is represented by one colour and then maybe a second colour, but never a great variety of colours aside from on certain enemies. The first two floors are red unless you go to the crypts, which are a light blue. The second two is a yellowish green, the third two are another bunch of red floors, but this one's an even deeper red. And the final two are this dark grey with red dotted throughout the environments. It adds this tension, especially if you join a new location on low health or under equipped. Given just how distinct the areas look, it creates a bit of a mental game, where if you're overthinking you could miss an enemy at a crucial moment or not properly prioritise targets, causing a run to end. To add even more variety to the game, you can unlock different characters that change aspects of a run. Some in smaller ways like Freya, who has more health but is entirely steel, which is a lot harder to get back, more expensive at shops, and the only real benefit is that steel can go beyond your max HP, when just normal healing can't, so it makes taking damage a lot more of a risk even if it technically gives you more health. Of course, you could get lucky with items that turn all of your steel into normal health. You basically have a normal run then except with a boosted start and a different gun. But if you don't get that, playing Freya could be really stressful. But some characters change the game in bigger ways like Skuld. Skuld starts off with some more items and a pretty decent gun, but he constantly loses health over time. The only way to regen that health is to damage enemies. Playing him gives you no time to breathe and you have to play as fast as you can. Or Nord, who starts off with an infinite ammo magic weapon that can't be swapped away and some extra coin at the cost of starting out at half health. He's my personal favourite. Now, yes, I know aside from the rhythm mechanic, BPM doesn't do a whole lot of new stuff in its genre. It does have a lot of good quality of life features like saving during runs, but also an option to change the game's strictness on voiding your inputs when you miss a beat. You can also change the game's saturation and colour shift of each of the game's stages individually if you personally found certain aspects of the game a bit too garish to look at. The game also has cool challenge modes, which includes a boss rush, a mode without any rhythm mechanics, a shopless mode, a mode to look like Doom Classic, and many more that I didn't even unlock. And while it might seem with the length of this video and a fair few of the mechanics are being very innovative that the game is lackluster, I couldn't disagree more with that, especially when you consider the game's price. And just to comment on the music one more time, the way it ramps up as you progress through the game, it just works really well to make each boss fight a really tense experience. And the way fights end, with you breaking from the rhythm to shoot however fast or slow you want, makes for a truly unique and one-of-a-kind experience that I highly recommend.